And is there any further public comment? Seeing none, I'd like to offer once again any comments from the board or registrar. Sure.
I'll make a comment. From everything that I've been hearing, it seems like we are focusing on scaffolding, which is large buildings. But there are many people who do murals in their homes. And you have artists that who own buildings, they own their own studios and do murals inside of their studios. So to me, we're saying that we want them to have a license.
No.
I'm
You can do this, no.
No.
So, well, if you're an owner and you have a studio and you're doing murals inside, I mean, we're still talking about a mural, it's art. So for me, I lean more toward the exemption rule, and I support the staff's recommendation for neutral.
Any more comments?
Can I get clarity as to a former practitioner? Is the intent of this to exclude any substrate alterations and or repairs? To me, that's the biggest issue. If you've got a stucco building that's got lead on it that needs to be prepared before you put this beautiful mural on it, who's doing that substrate repair, alteration, coating to accept the mural? And if that's excluded, I need to know that.
Still registrar vote.
Yeah, if I could just, one reason why staff recommended a neutral on this bill is because it looks like there's still some questions that need to be answered. But in answer to Member Galaris's question, on page 138, in the summary, this is right from the bill itself. It defines what a mural is as a fine work of art. And so it's an artwork that's put on by hand. It's not going to be patching or repairing the surface or using a roller or spraying out the side of a building. That's not what we're talking about. It's just fine artwork. And I heard from the board, there's some concern about scaffolding. Mike was mentioning a statute that talks about other exemptions. Scaffolding, when it's affixed to a structure, is going to require a license. And so by considering a neutral position, we can continue to work with the author and say maybe a scaffold, if it's a multi-story building, maybe that should be installed appropriately by a licensed contractor. We can look at that. And the third issue that I heard was about workers' comp. Workers' comp would still apply if the muralist had workers, but maybe the bill could clarify that. So there's really like three issues here. The first is the definition of a muralist appropriate? I mean, it would seem to be, just to find the work of it, it's fine art put on by hand, copyright or patented. It's not your general painting of a structure.
Thank you. Any more comments?
I had a question. How do you pay for workman's comp if you don't have a license?
Well, same way as the gardeners were. I mean, you could still, if the work is clearly excluded from licensure, the workers' comp carriers will sell a workers' comp policy. We don't encourage them to do it if a license is required, but if you have a monthly maintenance agreement with a gardener, there's an exemption for gardeners, and they can get workers' compensation insurance. This would benefit the muralists, who today, I don't know if they have workers' comp or not, but if you clearly exclude it, then they should be able to obtain workers' compensation insurance. They could potentially be obtaining it now because there is ambiguity in this law. You ask somebody, and I had an opportunity recently to meet with building officials, and I did ask the question, what do you think about muralists? And when you define if somebody doing artwork, they do look at that differently than somebody that's prepping a building and then painting a building. So this does give clarity to what a muralist can and can't do, but the points are well taken. That's why, from staff's perspective, maybe take a neutral position, continue to work with the author. Rebecca, you want to add anything to that?
I had another question regarding the, so what I'm curious about the complaints that exist currently regarding this. So do you have any examples of what those are?
Yeah, so when you think about artwork, if you've been to the Sacramento airport, they have a huge red rabbit. That's not what we're talking about here, but there are ornamental iron companies and others that would do something like that. But there are, I would say, consumer or public advocates that are looking at what city and councils are doing with these hiring of muralists. And many of them are quite for large dollar amounts. And so those are the complaints that we're receiving. I'm not aware that we've received it from, I would say, consumer advocates or competitors, contractors. I'm not aware of any complaints having been received from an awarding agency or a private building owner or a commercial building owner. Steve?
I would agree with that.
Yeah, but there are others that are saying, wait a second, they should have a license. And it's not clearly defined that they don't. I would believe the intent of this bill is to clearly exempt, if it's, ultimately chaptered, muralists that meet the definition in the bill from requiring a contractor's license. But I don't believe there's any intent of this bill to not require that they would still need to get a building permit. When I talk to these building permits, like they still got to get a permit because if it's on a multi-story building, they're going to have to keep traffic away from. Can't have a health and safety issue here. But I did not bring up the concern about installing the scaffold. If it's just a freestanding scaffold, there's not going to be a license requirement. But if you see these high-rise buildings, yes, it's going to be attached to the building itself for safety reasons. A license would be required. So we could look at that.
Yeah, I agree that there is some ambiguity that we need to understand. As a father of a creative, I really appreciate your position and your passion around the comment on both sides. And I think there's a special place for creatives that the world needs, and it can't all be in the confines of enforcement. We got to. I do agree that there is some ambiguity that we need to understand so that we can make the appropriate decisions. But again, that I appreciate both sides and the passion that you have for this because it is important. But I want to make sure we're not going to police something that we don't need to be policing. And that's where I need to have more clarity so that we're not adding more work for enforcement to something that is that what we really need to do and really understand it before we just enforce something that we're that's really important to the world, which is being creative. So I appreciate your comments.
Board member Ryan.
So I'm a plastering contractor. We've done a lot of service preparation for muralists. Primarily, if you've been to Fisherman Wharf in San Francisco, you can see the huge whales on the parking structure. All that was done with scaffolding and service preparations done by licensed contractors. And muralist, I don't know, what degree he had or she had. I appreciate the individual from Monterey County explaining that when they work with muralists, they have liability insurance, not necessarily licenses, but they're covered. I guess there's a juxtaposition here between requiring muralists to have a license and artistic license. There's two different things going on here. So there's been some questions raised by a number of the board members, and I can see this going back to the author to define some of our questions before we take an action.
Through the chair, is it possible? I understand that the time was extended to 5 minutes, and my time was at 3 minutes. So because I'm the author or the co-sponsors representing the co-sponsor, I want to offer some clarity if I could have the rest of my time.
Yes.
Okay, so
State your name again, please.
absolutely. Deanna Sessoms, Monterey Bay Public Affairs Manager with the League of California Cities. We are co-sponsors of this bill, and I want to provide clarity on a couple things. The first one being, we represent the cities across the state of California. Nothing in this bill stops the permitting process or other safety requirements of muralists. Nothing stops the requirement that scaffolding be obtained, a licensed contractor or other safety requirements that the concerns that have come up. This is simply the work of the muralist. And it's longstanding practice that muralists have not been licensed contractors. So I'm happy to answer questions if I can, but I wanted to just clarify that the safety requirements, the permitting requirements, scaffolding being done by licensed contractors, none of that is exempted under this bill. It's simply the work of the muralist. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You don't have the experience needed.
So I have just some general comments. Obviously, this is a lot of it is public monies, right? The public monies of tax dollars is going to this public art. I agree a lot with the art. art in general. I appreciate that. I do want to state that us as a board, CSLB, we're licensing contractors. With Jack C33 licenses, we had over 15,000 licenses in C33. A lot of those are muralists currently. So by us as a board, we need to, before we make these types of decisions, to exempt whole classification of work. We do have licensed contractors in this space, full stop. So I think a lot of, in my experience, and I don't know this to be correct, when cities receive some sort of public monies or public dollars to do a muralist project, these are large projects. These are all large projects. And a lot of times these contracts are awarded to that potential muralist company and then might have to subcontract to another firm to do the wall prep, building prep, scaffold. So at that point in time, it's not just art on a wall. There's more to it. These are large contracts. So for me, I would recommend oppose unless amended in terms of author needs to identify some of these items that we're explaining. Meaning, one, a contract cannot just be awarded to a specific muralist. And if they plan to subcontract all this additional work out, at that point, they are a contractor, in my opinion. And that's the opinion of our board when you're talking about subcontracting work. So I totally agree. Art is very important. I want to make sure what we're explaining is we currently have muralists, C33, that have gone through the ropes to get a license to do this type of work. And if we're, as a board, exempting all that, we're kind of doing harm to all of our past previous licensees who have tried to do this work and gone through the process. So in my opinion, it's like we need these answers from the author to identify all these specific steps, because you can't take a contract and then subcontract scaffold work. You can't without being a licensed contractor. So with that, those are my comments.
Thank you, Chairman Mark. Any other comments from the board?
Oh,
You had that first, go ahead.
Or you have the floor.
Okay. I totally agree with Chairman Mark. I think if we allow exemption for a whole classification, we're doing a disservice to the contractors that already have the C33 license. If we could maybe go to the author and see if there's a different exemption, maybe, I don't know what the standard muralist group of money that you guys normally do, maybe that's 20,000, 30,000. But for a project that's maybe over a few $100,000, I think that goes to what you were saying is they're probably going to contract out. Therefore, there's more liabilities and we should be taking care of those contractors. It's just my suggestion.
Thank you. Board Member Love.
I just, listening to the chair, I agree with a lot of things that he's saying, but I just have a question about the staff's recommendation. We talked earlier about supporting the staff's recommendation of neutral in order to go back to the author to talk about changes and amendments. Would that not still fall under the neutral vote?
No. If we were going to take a neutral position, that means we would not formally write a letter for this particular bill. We take a support, we would formally write a support as written. Oppose unless amended, we would oppose the bill unless the amendments that we as a board decide to do would then take place.
So we would do oppose with amendments, not neutral with amendments.
We could do, as a board, we could take a motion on any of those particular items.
Okay, can I make a motion for a neutral with amendments to go back to the author to discuss some ramifications and changes to bring back to the.
I think that's appropriate. I was going to ask for the first vote to be as recommended by staff neutral, but if you wish to make it or neutral with amendments,
Yes,
that would be pertaining.
I would.
Okay, do I have a second for that? Board taking a neutral position with the amendments. Second. All right, we have Ray move seconded. Mr. Williams, would you take the vote, please?
For board discussion, So make sure I'm clarifying, if we take a neutral vote with amendments, we would provide possible amendments to the board or the bill author. But us as a board, the author, if they do not take our amendments, proposed amendments, we are not taking an opposed position.
Correct. Rosie, we can take the roll, please.
Who was the second motion?
Henry, not Henry.
Michael Mark,
No.
Joel Barton,
No.
Rodney Cobos. No. Miguel Galarza,
Aye.
Amanda Gallo,
Aye.
Alan Guy has an excused absence, Jacob Lopez has an excused absence, Diana Love,
Aye.
Henry Nutt,
Aye.
Steve Pinelli,
No.
Joseph Preciado,
Aye.
Jim Wayne,
Aye.
Thomas Ruiz,
No.
Harry Zeiger has an excused absence. Motion passes.
That's all right. Thank you, everyone.
Need a break.
All right, so moving on to our, we'll take a break. All right, yeah, go get a late check out. So we'll take, break. Is that appropriate?
It's just a reminder, if you haven't checked out, we're now starting extended, a late checkout. If you're parked and you didn't pay for your parking, you're gonna pay for your parking.
Yeah.
I think it's gonna be 90 hours, so it's just nice. It's
Well,
out there.
if I get a late checkout, you want to see me in my writing here.
So as board chair, we'll take a 10-minute recess till 11 or 10:55.
Thanks.
10:55.
At 12:30 checkout.
Yes, clarity.
Where's Joel?
Joel.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, he's gone.
We're gonna start this meeting about.
Using them as.
Work under a C
We're good. Relax. Wonderful. The time is now 10:58. We call this meeting back in order. We left off with Ledge. There's one more, so I'll turn it back over to Joel Barton.
Thank you, Chair Mark. Yes, today, our final item today is item 2I. Senate Bill 517, Viello. An analysis for this bill can be found in the board packet on page 140. SB 517 is currently pending the Assembly Business and Professions Committee. Ms. May, can you provide a brief update?
So SB 517 has been amended since it was discussed at the April Legislative Committee meeting. As you may remember, the bill had required a contractor to include the name and contact information of the subcontractor if the subcontractor was going to perform more than 50% of the total estimated project. The bill now instead requires the home improvement contract to contain a yes or no checkbox indicating whether a subcontractor will be used on a project, along with a disclosure that the contractor will provide a list of the subcontractors, including names, contact information, license numbers, and license classifications to the consumer upon request. This bill also requires the home improvement contract to notify the consumer that the prime or direct contractor is responsible for the construction project. However, it does not preclude administrative discipline against any subcontractor or home improvement salesperson. Staff recommend the board take a support position. This bill provides greater transparency between the prime contractor and consumer and may reduce the number of mechanics liens placed on homeowners. Back to you.
Thank you, Ms. May. Are there any board member comments or questions on SB 517? Seeing no board member comments or questions, let's take public comment. Are there any members of the public wanting to comment on SB 517? Are there any board member comments before I ask for the vote? Is there a motion on SB 517? So moved. Second. Very good, moved and seconded. Mr. Williams, would you take the roll call vote, please?
Michael Mark,
Aye.
Joel Barton,
Aye.
Rodney Cobos.
Aye.
Kevin Flores, and I, got him. I want to try to answer excuse absent, Jacob Lopez as an excuse absent, Diana Love.
Aye.
Harry Nutt.
Aye.
Steve Benelli.
Aye.
Joseph Feliciano.
Aye.
Chamber Wayne.
Aye.
Robert Williams.
Aye.
Mary Tucker, the excuse absence, the motion passed.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. This concludes the legislative items today. Back to you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Joel. Great job. Obviously, there was a lot of heavy discussion on SB 456 contractors exemptions. My ask to the incoming chair would be that maybe a committee should be formed from the board because there's so much discussion on that. So for a future, in my opinion, that would be great. Obviously, since there's amendments that need to be flying around, so working with whatever new ledge chair and maybe a committee would be formed. So that would be my request. Moving on, we got enforcement, item F. We are now on the enforcement section of our agenda, page 147. I turn it over to Enforcement Committee Chair Rodney Cobos.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The enforcement program statistical update begins on page 145 of the packet. It includes enforcement highlights and a thorough statistical update. I will now request Enforcement Chief Steve Rowe provide a couple of highlights.
Contract with Grace Home Builders to raise his existing home and add an accessory dwelling unit or ADU for $450,518. The project began in October 2020 and was abandoned in July 2022 when the contractor informed the consumer his company was shutting down its operations. The consumer had paid $412,190 for the project, but much of the work was either substandard or incomplete. CSLB industry expert inspected and estimated it would cost $487,000 to correct and complete the project. The investigation found multiple violations, including receiving an excessive deposit of $40,000, utilizing employee labor without workers' compensation insurance, abandonment, and substandard workmanship. An accusation was filed in February of 2025. Grace Home Builders entered into a stipulated settlement agreement resulting in revocation of their license, along with an order to pay approximately $9,000 in investigative costs to the CSLB and $434,000 in restitution to the consumer. Grace Home Builders must wait 3 years before reapplying for licensure. This case was also referred to the Sacramento County DA's office for criminal prosecution. The recommended charges included receiving payments in excess of value of work performed or material delivered, diversion of construction funds, and grand theft. Unfortunately, the DA declined to file charges. This highlight demonstrates the need for CSLB to continue to educate consumers and contractors to not request or accept money in advance of the performance. The next highlight I would like to give is on page 150. It's titled, Revoked License Pleads Guilty to Felony in Marin County, convicted in jury trial a month later in San Mateo County. In March 2025, revoked contractor David Forkosh pled guilty in Marin County Superior Court to a felony for fraudulently using someone else's contractor's license to secure a $220,000 remodeling contract. That same month, in response to CSLB's investigation, the Alameda County District Attorney's Office filed charges against Forkosh for fraudulent use of a license, unlicensed contracting, and false advertising. That case remains pending. In April 2025, Forkosh faced a jury trial in San Mateo County where several CSLB peace officers testified. He was convicted on all counts, including fraudulent use of a license, unlicensed contracting, and accepting payments exceeding the value of performed or material delivered. The judge remanded Forkosh in custody until sentencing on June 13th, 2025. CSLB continues to receive complaints and has assigned investigators to several new cases. Forkosh has been placed on CSLB's alert board for monitoring, and a CSLB supervising special investigator has informed his Marin County probation officer of the ongoing investigations. This is an example of a repeat offender that most DAs will consider filing criminal charges in response to a CSLB investigation. This includes my highlights, and I'll turn it back over to Chair Phillips.
Thank you, Steve.
Excuse me one second. Can I add something to that? It's so we're really excited about, we look at the diversion of funds, and Steve mentioned, he highlighted a case that the DA didn't file, what the DA did file on. We're currently working with the California District Attorneys Association on developing jury instruction for 484B. That's diversion of construction funds. That could be charged as a felony. So that's just going to be a real wake-up call for the industry. Like right now, diversion of construction funds can be charged as a felony, and it is charged, but these jury instructions are going to be very helpful in getting more DAs to file on these cases.
Great point, thank you, Dave.
Continue with statistical update. You will note at the top of page 147, enforcement continues to effectively retain and recruit staff. Maintaining a 5% vacancy rate is impressive. I also want to mention the staff's continued prioritization of resources. The work performed by SSAs at the mediation centers allows respectful investigators to focus on complaints that may include an egregious act that warrants legal action. From July 1st, 2024, enforcement investigations resulted in 1,859 legal actions, with 515 of the legal actions referred to local prosecutors for possible criminal filing. Near the top of page 152, you'll find complaint statistics. For the period of July 1st, 2024 to April 30th, 2025, a total of 16,737 complaints have been initiated. With current staffing levels, the optimum maximum enforcement division caseload is 4,895 pending complaints. As of April 30th, 2025, the pending caseload was 5,065. Staff service analysis assigned to the two CSLB intake mediation centers have done a remarkable job of mediating consumer complaints. From July 1st, 2024 to April 30th, 2025, their efforts, along with the investigators in the investigation centers, have resulted in $25.1 million in restitution to financially injured parties. It's important to remember that enforcement staff handle more than 1,200 consumer complaints filed monthly, with approximately 100 analysis and investigators. This is accomplished by initial complaint investigation by staff services analysis to determine if the complaint warrants referral to a special investigator for possible legal action or is suitable for settlement attempts. I want to confirm that while a complaint may be settled with restitution to a consumer, staff will still address any possible violations with respondents and often issue written advisory notices. The goal is for the contractor not to reoffend or receive future complaints. Another board goal is to appropriately disposition all 100 complaints within 270 days of receipt. As of May 15, 2025, 297 complaints exceeded 270 days in age. Enforcement supervisors continue to work closely with their staff, provide guidance during the regular case strategy discussions, and monthly case reviews in an effort to reduce the backlog of age cases. At the top of page 153, you'll find information regarding CSLB sponsored arbitration and disciplinary action statistics. A total of 342 complaints were resolved through arbitration, resulting in $2,562,407 in restitution ordered to injured parties. Let us know if you have any questions about these statistics. And finally, I will provide a brief update on proactive enforcement, which is conducted by 27 special investigators assigned to the statewide investigator fraud team, or SWIFT. This information begins at the middle of page 154 of the packet. From July 1st, 29 undercover sting operations across the state participated in 334 sweep days and responded to 551 leads. 4 tips received from industry and the public. Investigators completed 2,744 cases as a result of the operations including 355 cases referred to criminal prosecution. Additionally, over 992 advisory notices were issued for relatively minor violations. And lastly, at the top of page 156, you will see the Enforcement Division Experience Verification Unit has conducted 821 application investigations during the period of April 30th, 2023 to April 30th, 2025. Of that total, 443 were verified or approved, 139 were withdrawn, 233 were denied, 6 denials were appealed. That concludes the enforcement program statistical update. This is an informational item only, no action required of the board. Do any board members have any comments? Are there any comments from the public? Joe. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Great job, Rodney. Moving on to agenda item G. Beginning on page 161 of your meeting material. It's going to be licensing, item G. I turn it over to licensing committee chair, Jim Wayne.
Thank you. Morning, I'm Jim Wayne, the 2024-2025 Licensing Committee Chair. I am providing the Licensing and Testing Division update today with assistance from Licensing Chief Carol Gagnon. The licensing section begins on page 159 of the board packet. First, Carol is going to give a brief update on how the passage of SB 641, affecting hazardous substance removal certification, exam. Carol.
Thank you, Jim. This is described on page 163 of the board packet, and as previously discussed during the executive wildfire agenda item, SB 641 will require the hazardous substance removal certification for wildfire debris removal in declared disaster areas. For the LA County wildfire disaster debris removal, LA County Public Works requires a hazardous substance removal certification to obtain a debris removal permit and a contractor debris removal. A contractor performing phase 2 debris removal in LA County without this certification is in violation of Business and Professions Code 7110. Staff have worked closely with LA County Public Works during the wildfire response. LA County has reported that the requirement for debris removal contractors to have the hazardous substance removal certification with the listed trades is working well and being complied with. The trade classifications, as Rebecca announced earlier, allowed to do debris removal are the A, general engineering, a B, general building, or a combination of a C12 earthwork and paving and C21 building moving and demolition. The only concern that was brought up earlier is that the hazardous substance removal certification does not require a 40-hour HAZWOPER training as part of the CSLB certification. However, the hazardous substance removal certification exam does cover many aspects of HAZWOPER safety requirements, and HAZWOPER training is required for both the debris removal contractors and their employees to perform debris removal. So after SB 641 becomes law, the hazardous substance removal certification exam will be expanded to cover disaster debris removal tasks. And the process of updating the exam will include interviews with contractors involved in disaster debris removal, 2 workshops, a small survey, much smaller than we normally do, and will take between 6 and 8 months to complete. Our goal is to have these changes completed by June of 2026. Jim, will you please ask for comments?
Any comments or questions for board members?
Thank you, Jim. I know myself and Alan fairly passionate about this. You know, having had a HAZ license for 20 years and just seeing people do this work just willy-nilly. So I applaud the work that went into this to protect the public and to protect the employees, quite frankly, from harming themselves.
Great. Any other board member comments or questions? Anything from the public? Seeing none, moving right on to item number 2, licensing and testing program update. For the licensing and testing program update, agenda item G2, please turn to page 167 in your packet. Starting applications, the table on page 167 indicates the number of applications received for new licenses, additional classifications, replacing qualifiers, and home improvement salespersons. As you can see, CSLB received over 13,000 applications in the last quarter. The number was an increase of over 2,000 from the previous quarter, something which often happens during the springtime. Quick update on the two types of trade exam waivers that the board voted on in March. As you may recall, the board voted to allow the state candidates with 5 or more years of licensure in good standing to waive the B general building trade exam if they have passed the NASPA commercial builders exam. In addition, the board voted to allow out-of-state candidates with a general builder or residential remodeling license who have passed their state's exam and have 5 or more years of licensure good standing to apply for a waiver of California's B02 residential remodeling trades. As of May 29th, staff have already received 4 applications for the B general building trade requesting a trade exam waiver for the NASPA commercial builder stores. NASPA also sent an email blast to all of its members telling them about this new opportunity for people licensed in states other than California at the end of May. Chair Mark recommended during the March board meeting that staff inform out-of-state candidates about the limitations of the trade they are applying for in California. Candidates applying for the NASPA trade waiver are directed to the fast facts on our website describing what a B general building contractor can and cannot do in California with this trade. Staff have not received any applications for the B02 residential remodeling trade waiver yet. Once people do begin applying, they will receive limit letters describing the scope of work that a B02 is allowed in California. On page 168, you can see that all of our processing times are staying close to or under 3 weeks. Staff has kept licensing and processing times at or below 3 weeks for over a year now and are doing an excellent job at keeping up with incoming applications and renewals. Few units have even managed to keep their response times under 2 weeks for the entire year. Licensing management and staff are proud of the fact that they have had no backlogs in over a year. As seen on page 170, CSLB received over 29,000 renewal applications in the last quarter. This is up from the previous quarter, but again, this is typical for the spring season. In addition, staff reports that close to 70 contractors who were survivors of the LA area fires took advantage of the governor's executive order to defer their renewal fees for a year. On page 174 and 175 details the work by licensing judgments unit. Staff notified contractors of outstanding liabilities from other state agencies or judgments and outstanding bond claims. Bond claims comprised most of their work in the last quarter, with over 1,300 letters being mailed for bond claims alone in the past 3 months. 538 judgment-related notifications were sent to contractors and 425 letters related to outstanding liabilities. I will now turn it back over to Carol, Gagnon Licensing Chief, the testing program update. Carol.
Thank you, Jim. Good morning. For the testing program update, please turn to page 175 in your board. CSLB had a record-breaking year with over 56,000 exams being administered by PSI between May 2024 and April 2025. 79 of those exams were taken out of state in the Wilsonville, Oregon Test Center. And as indicated on page 179, the Exam Development Unit released 4 updated exams between February and April 2025, the A General Engineering, the B General Building, C36 Plumbing, and C51 Structural Steel. In addition, the Spanish exams for B General Building and C36 Plumbing will be ready to be released as soon as the bank translations are completed and verified by staff. The Exam Development Unit currently has 13 additional exams that are undergoing the exam development process right now. The Spanish exam update begins on page 180. This is part of CSLB's ongoing efforts to reduce language barriers for applicants and licensees, part of our strategic plan item 1.1. Between May 2022 and May 2024, and April 2025, over 11,000 Spanish exams were taken by CSLB candidates. Staff have also translated the translator form and letter for candidates who request other trade exams that haven't been translated, but they request those to be taken with a Spanish translator. So we actually translated the forms and the letters so that they can read the instructions in Spanish. And these will be put into use in the next month or so. The English toggle option has been added to all 10 of our Spanish exams administered in the test center. This allows candidates who choose to take a Spanish exam, but may have learned the names of the tools, materials, and process in English to see the questions in both languages as they take their test. As table 181 indicates, introducing the toggle option has increased the pass rate for all of our Spanish exam candidates. And I'll turn it back to Jim for comments on all these items.
Thank you, Carol. Any board members have any comments or questions on this item? Members of the public? action, the licensing committee today, so that includes our licensing, testing.
Thank you, Jim. Great report, great report. With that, we move on to item H, agenda item H, page 185 of the packet, public affairs. And with that, I turn it over to Public Affairs Committee Chair, Ms. Plug.
Chair Mark. I'm Diana Love, Public Affairs Committee Chair. Chief of Public Affairs Catherine White will introduce the first item before I present the Public Affairs Program update. Catherine.
Take a minute to set up the projector and then, so this is a video that you're gonna be very impressed with. It stars board member Steve Finelli. It's fantastic. Some of us will have to relocate. It's about 4 minutes long.
Before you build an ADU on your property, there are things you need to know and things you need to do. Accessory dwelling units, commonly known as ADUs, are housing built on the same property as someone's primary home. While they offer benefits like added living space, rental income, or a place for aging family members, they also come with important planning, permitting, and construction requirements. That's where CSLB comes in. We're here to help you understand the process and protect yourself from costly mistakes. I'm Catherine White, Chief of Public Affairs at the Contractors State License Board. I sat down with CSLB board member Steve Finelli, who is also the Chief Plumbing Inspector for the San Francisco Department of Building and Inspection. We began by discussing one of the most important first steps. How can you know if your property is even suitable for an ADU?
Well, depending on the type of ADU you would like to buy or build, get a manufactured ADU, or you can build one from the ground up, depending on the size. So the size of your backyard, means of egress or fire, just all around what you're trying to put and where you're trying to put it. So that's a big factor. You know, if you only have 500 square feet in the backyard, you're more than likely not going to be able to build one, but it all depends on what you're trying to do. First thing I would do is go to the Contractors State License Board at cslb.ca.gov and check my license, their license, and see the license of the person that's trying to build your ADU or accessory dwelling unit or manufactured unit. You want to make sure, one, is that they have the proper licenses to do that, and the CEMs and everything, the contracts are all there. A lot of problems, a lot of people come and they're asking for money up front. If that's the case, I would really be wary of something like that. I would definitely want to see something in writing. I want something in a contract. I want to make sure that that's solidified and solid. It's not somebody just knocking on my door saying, "Oh, we'll do everything for you for $100,000 and do your homework and look at what you're doing." That's the most important thing. You're going to want to get bids. You want to get more than one bid to do your property. And I know that some places it's very hard to get people. We can't find enough great people. They only found this one person. If you look around hard enough, you'll find more than one person to give you a bid on a property, especially when they're, it's a big investment. Two is money up front. Like I said, if it's $1,000 up front, I think, that's a down payment. It can be something that you start the contract with. Okay, that's about as maximum you should do. I wouldn't go any higher than that. Making sure you have that contract. Look at their reviews. Look at their reviews. Look at the contract license board. See if there's been any complaints against them. See if they will have anything pending against them that would be an issue. That's something you want to make sure that you're not getting put in a position where, I'm not saying you're getting scammed, but being taken advantage of. So you want to make sure you're not being taken advantage of it. Checking your contract. And when I say check your contract, I don't mean, it says they're going to build this and we're good, and walk away from it, even though it's a 5-page or 10-page contract. Read through the contract. You want to make sure foundation's included. You want to make sure the electrical, the plumbing, the mechanical is included. You don't want somebody just to come over and drop an ADU in your backyard or build something and they walk away and nothing's connected. Next thing you know, you have a shed because you have no running water, you have no electricity, you have nothing. And now the costs for that is going to be so expensive that you won't be able to do it. So you want to make sure whatever you're purchasing, you make sure everything is encompassed in that contract. The biggest one is, and this is one that dear to my heart, is making sure that all your permits have been signed off before the final payment's done. that everything is completed and up to satisfactory of what you all agreed to. The last thing you want to do is give your final payment of, let's just say $100,000 out of a $300,000 job and find out that the water doesn't run, the electricity doesn't work, and that person's no longer around it. You want to make sure you had your final inspections done, the plumbing, electrical, building, fire, anything else that you had to have done is done and completed, and everything is working before that final payment is done.
With that, I'll turn the wheel back to Diana. Okay, thank you, Catherine. And thank you to our star board members, Pinelli. And at this time, I'm going to ask Mr. Pinelli to speak and if you have any additional comments or anything you want to add.
The one thing is, with that being done, is I don't know when it's gonna be put out, but I've reached out to a few building departments, especially in California here, but that I know outside of California, but they're interested in having something like that connected with their websites, because you got a lot of problems happening right now because ADUs are being pushed so hard by everywhere and everyone, especially I believe now in, once they San Jose, you can sell your ADU. That's a new thing that came out. They made it so you can sell your ADU as separate. And it just, I think Berkeley wanted to be the first and San Jose beat them. So they started that, and it's becoming even something more of a business decision. So build the ADU, sell the ADU, put a fence between both of you, and now you have two separate entrances and you made a lot of money from selling it. So they're trying to make sure that people that are trying to push these ADUs to build, there's something they can, contractors and homeowners and whatever can see something, and they want a connection. So hopefully we can get, and I believe they're going to make a connection with building departments and have it on the website. So there's a link to the CSLB so they can have the video or at least have some kind of dialogue back and forth. So they're looking forward to it.
Well, thank you. This is an informational item which requires no action from the board. However, I will ask the board if they have any comments.
But one, I thought the video was great. And so I appreciate you guys putting it together. The one opportunity that I would say that I've seen in some other YouTube videos is that the video has a description, an opportunity to put like links into a description. And so if there was an opportunity to have a call to action, right? So let's say a member from the public watches the video and says, okay, well, as an example, I want to be able to see if there's a screenshot, right, that says where to find on the CSLB website to check the license. If there's an opportunity to put that link in the description of the video so that somebody watching the video can say, oh, I can click on that link and then go directly to that. It'll take me to that spot on the CSLB website. And there might be other opportunities there. I haven't done like a deep dive, but I think on the last slide, or maybe the image of the video, there's a list of top things that could be done by consumers in order to ensure that their own protection and advocate for themselves. Maybe there are links on the CSLB website that could then direct that consumer who's watching the video to find that specific spot without then having to go back to the website, navigate it, and find it for themselves. But otherwise, I thought it was a wonderful video, and I'm glad that it's a resource out there, and excited to hear that there are other contractors out there that want to link to it to support their own efforts.
And love,
Yes, sir.
just me. But I tend to post a lot, not on Facebook or anything else, but LinkedIn. So this is professional. And it seems like not all of us on the board are following CSLB as a page. And I tend to be the only board member who actually likes a post. So I would encourage all of our board members to at least follow the page. And when something posts, have the support of our public affairs people, so that the board is engaged. So thank you.
Well, then. Any other board comments? Any comments from the public? I'm one public member. Seeing no comments, I will move on to the next item, H2, and which is my public affairs program update. I will now share the public affairs update starting on page 189. The Public Affairs Office, or PAO, is responsible for media, industry, licensing, and consumer communications, as well as outreach. They provide proactive public relations, respond to media inquiries, and develop and distribute publications and newsletters. PAO creates content for CSLB social media channels and website, including webcasts and videos. After devastating wildfires swept through Southern California in January, many homeowners now face the daunting task of rebuilding their homes and their lives. Starting in January through the end of April, CSLB enforcement staff help survivors at disaster recovery centers, known as DRCs, in Los Angeles and Altadena, connecting thousands of them with recovery resources that include finding a qualified licensed contractor. PAO staff provided enforcement staff publications and signs to distribute and ensure publications were available in English and Spanish. CSLB also maintains a toll-free disaster hotline Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. On page 192, you'll see how PAO continues to increase CSLB's following on social media. CSLB maintains an active presence on Facebook, Instagram, X, and LinkedIn. The most popular post on Facebook was posted in March and reminded consumers that unlicensed contracting in a declared disaster area is a felony. Posts about CSLB's sting operations also continue to be popular on social media. In addition to sting press releases between July 1 and April 30th, CSLB issued press releases regarding new laws and hiring licensed contractors after the LA fires. PAO responded to 93 media inquiries between July and the end of April. On page 197, shows the outreach events CSLB attended between July and April, showing events around the state. On page 198, you will see a list of the publications and reports CSLB completed between July and April. This includes English and Spanish versions of the popular Get Licensed to Build publication that pairs with the monthly licensing workshops. The Public Affairs Office also writes and publishes content for internal communications. On page 199, you will see a list of intranet articles PAO has produced between July and April, highlighting internal events, the celebration of Women in Construction Week, and more. On page 201, you'll see that CSLB's Public Information Center maintained wait times under the board goal of 6 minutes for all of 2024. Wait times did increase in January, but much of this is due to a significant increase in calls after the wildfires. CSLB received more than 18,000 calls that month, much higher than the 11,000 to 13,000 usually received. Since this is an information item, no action is required of the board. Do any board members have any comments?
I had a question on the live stream videos. I noticed a lot of great topics that were seen. Can we include mental health awareness in that? That affects our industry pretty dramatically with the suicide rate. And we're above industry standard. I think segmented minors only. And it'd be something that's great for just we take a stab at that, create some more awareness around that topic.
So it's a mental health tab or mental health.
Mental health awareness, there's a mental health awareness month, already passed it, but something that is really rallying around the construction industry, and lots of companies are take a pause for that. They're doing stand downs at their job sites to just create that dialogue. That's important for people to talk about not being okay at work and being comfortable about talking about it so that they can get things addressed that they need.
Something we can look into.
Yeah, great.
Okay. Any other comments? Any comments from the public? Thank you. That concludes this agenda item. Next, we will turn to two items that were first discussed at the Public Affairs Committee meeting on May 15th. Item H3, review, discussion, and possible action regarding the Find My Licensed Contractor grant. I had previously requested that the Find My Licensed Contractor title be renamed to Find a Licensed Contractor. The Public Affairs Committee first discussed this last month, and now we are bringing it to the full board for consideration. But first, some history regarding it. Catherine?
Yes, so for the background, the Find My Licensed Contractor feature was first launched in January 2018, make it easier for consumers to find a licensed contractors for their home improvement projects. The feature also helps contractors search for possible subcontractors and awarding agencies look for bidders for public works contracts. The feature continues to be regularly used as stakeholders use it in researching a contractor. In 2024, the Find My Licensed Contractor page was viewed nearly 2 million times, and it's one of the top 10 pages viewed on the website. As a result, it is noted in different locations around the website. If the board chooses to move forward with changing, staff will need to update the various locations on the website with this branding, which should take a couple days of staff time. Staff are neutral on this potential change, but will follow the direction the board decides. With that, I'll turn the table back to Chair Love for discussion and a possible motion.
Thank you, Catherine. And I just want to say that I brought this to the attention of the board because I myself was doing a lot of searching and receiving phone calls for consumers. And even though it is stated that we get a lot of, you have 2 million hits on it, I personally think it's because it's the only other place to click when you're looking for a contractor. But it says Find My Licensed Contractor. And when you are looking for a contractor, it should say Find a Licensed Contractor because that's what you're looking for. It said my, it assumes that you already have a contractor. And that's not what you have. You're looking for a contractor. So, and then I talked to, since I represent seniors, the seniors that are calling, they were having a few that I did talk to were having difficulty trying to figure out how to find a licensed contractor when this says Find My Licensed Contractor, and they didn't have one. So that was the preference of why I asked for the change. So just wanted to let you know. Any other board comments? Yes.
And when I do agree with board member Love, because being raised by a mother that always used to correct me that you have something, you don't got something, and also may I rather than can I. I agree with that interpretation, so I support your stance.
Thank you. Any other comment?
I'm neutral on it, but I think the Find My is kind of like kind of common nomenclature in the digital world. You hear things online, it's kind of like Find My. I think it's common, but again, I'm not against it. I'm which I think is kind of easy.
Anyone else?
My only comment, suggestion, like I'm the same way, I think Find My or Find It. I think it's just, as long as there's clarification when a consumer clicks the button, whatever button it is that all of the subcontractor classifications, all of it, what are you looking for? And then that way they know which one what drop down menu to push down. I know there's like a general, I think one page that's linked, but let's say for like a C20 contractor HVAC, they need to know I'm looking for a C20, just as long as, or general building or plumbing, they just need to know which contractor that they are looking for. And on that one pager, when they click the button, it's prominently visible because they just won't know what they're looking for. it's not their job to know what classification the contractor is. They're just looking for the type of work.
Well, on that page, the drop down would change and the drop down has a few different selections. You can put in your city, you can put in your zip code, or you can put in the classification too. So that's not going to change.
But yes, but what I'm saying is the consumer might not know what that classification is that they're looking for. So just kind of like a one pager that shows I'm looking for, let's say, a C43 sheet metal. They won't know what a C43 means unless they're going through the whole drop down. So that, you know, we already have a one pager. It just needs to be prominently on that find a or find my licensed contractor page.
And the drop down, if I'm not mistaken, Catherine, the drop down has all the classifications.
Yes, it does.
Yes, so nothing is really changing, just the word find a from find my. Okay. Any other board comments? And public comments? Okay, with that,